To Emily Chang. Emily, walk us through what we're about to see in about 4 or 5 minutes' time, and then from there, the next 25 minutes or so.
All right, John, 4 or 5 minutes time, and when the countdown clock gets to 0, you still got 7 more seconds before actual liftoff, but that is when the engines will light. The rocket will shoot up vertically in the air. About 2.5 minutes in, there will be separation. The crew capsule will separate from the booster. They will both continue on past the Kármán line. The crew capsule will go higher than the booster itself. That is when they will experience that weightlessness for 3 to 4 minutes. They'll be told to buckle back up with a 30-second warning, and they will make their way back down. They will be descending via parachute, so we are looking for full inflation with those parachutes. Once they land, and by the way, the booster will land on a landing pad in a specific location. The crew capsule will land somewhere in the area. Now, they know where they think it's going to land. They have a bunch of vehicles, I believe it's those Rivian trucks, stationed on a grid pattern, and they are all ready to zoom in to retrieve Jeff Bezos and his crew as soon as that landing happens. We are taking bets on who will emerge first. I think Jeff Bezos is going to be the first to open that hatch, but John and Tom, I'm curious who you expect to see first.
Well, I would see Mrs. Funk ladies first to exit.
Well, that's the polite thing to do, but Tom, it was Jeff
True.
Bezos who was the first in the capsule, I think, so maybe he'll be the first to exit too.
John, at T-minus 2 minutes and plus here, I think it's important, as Mr. Stanovic mentioned, we have wind in Van Horn, and as Emily mentioned, there are 3 parachutes. Out in the oceans of Cape Canaveral and Cape Kennedy, this was always a very serious issue. Depending on where the astronauts came down in the water, it could be distant from an aircraft carrier.
Tom, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Let's do it again, because I always find this part the most fascinating. We're at T-minus 2 now. Then after the launch, we get the booster and the capsule, and they separate. And they separate at about 76 kilometers altitude. The capsule is going to go to about 106 kilometers. That's where they'll experience that zero gravity. They'll unstrap. They'll take in the curvature of the Earth. But that separation, Tom, and the booster returning to Earth, that is quite something to see.
Yeah, well, it's going to be something to see. And again, you're going to see 2 images up, folks, going up only 62 miles. I would hope that we will have camera images of not only the booster and the separated capsule at the same time, and then the return of the rocket, which, John, you and I mentioned, we're still not used to.
So 8 minutes after the launch, Tom, the reusable new Shepard booster should land. And I understand we should get some pictures of that, and we'll do our best to bring them to you. And then 11 minutes after the end, after that, Tom, the crew capsule lands. So this is going to be very quick. Once the launch takes place, a lot of this is going to take place very quickly. We're T-minus 1.
And we should mention good morning on Bloomberg Radio across this nation and around the world as well. We'll give you the image as much as we can for Bloomberg Radio. John, I'm going to give it over to you right now as we really get finally down to the final countdown.
For our audience worldwide on Bloomberg TV, on Bloomberg Radio, for our audience on Bloomberg QuickTake, the mission is officially known as NS-6D. The script is like something out of a movie. The richest man in the world taking his brother, an 82-year-old aviation icon and a teenager, in the first human flight for Blue Origin. It is 54 seconds away. We're going to hand over and listen into the command center and the communications that take place. We will not interrupt this. We are 45 seconds out.
T-minus 16, guidance internal. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Command engine start. 2, 1. cue. 30,000 feet, Mach 1.
Doesn't it, Gary?
It is totally different.
All right, you can follow along, of course, the speedometer in the bottom left, the altimeter in the middle of the screen there. So far appears to be a nominal flight. All right, coming up here on MECO, main engine cutoff. That will be followed shortly by separation. And at that point, after separation, we're going to let the astronauts unbuckle and take in the freedoms of zero-G. There is MECO, main engine cutoff. A beautiful shot down the New Shepard rocket. Look at that view. Unreal. Awaiting separation here.
Tom, that vision, that view never
And here
gets
we are.
old.
You can start to see.
And the
Stand
speed
by.
here, John, is very, very important
Separation
here.
of the
This is
capsule.
not orbital speed of 16, 17, 18,000 miles per hour, but nevertheless, thrust to get up into space well over 1,000 miles per hour. And John, the feet being added here out to the 62-mile point. We have passed the point of the great physics tension of the rocket and the capsule, now waiting for that separation.
The separation set to take place in its entirety, Tom, in about 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Let's head back to Emily Chang to walk us through the next 10 minutes or so. Emily.
All right, John. So look, on the left-hand corner of your screen, you see the countdown clock, the speed going down. When that gets to zero, that is the peak of the flight, or apogee, as they say in the space industry. That is when they will be feeling those 3 to 4 minutes of weightlessness, and immediately after it hits zero, the speed starts going back up as that crew capsule starts going back down. So there we are at zero. It's happened. The capsule has reached apogee.
Right.
We imagine Jeff Bezos and his crew are floating around weightless inside that capsule right now, and that they are all feeling that is so coveted, so rare, that so few humans have felt. Now, you're going to see the booster coming down first. So the lower portion of your screen, that will be the booster descending back to Earth. The crew capsule will descend after that. John and Tom?
An original image, John, something I'm still not used to, a booster of a lighter color in the capsule, a brighter white, separating apart as they come up to apogee, or I should say coming down. And John, it's just an absolutely original idea. No one thought of this Mercury, Gemini, Apollo.
Just absolutely stunning, Tom. And I say it completes in about 3 minutes' time. That's when the reusable New Shepard booster actually lands back down on Earth. And then we get the experience that I think everyone who goes in space wants to see. We know the cost of it for Virgin Galactic, Tom. It's about 200K, 250K. We still don't know what this is going to cost people if they would like to follow in the footsteps of Jeff Bezos and the other three.
You know, I got to admit, you're 1 minute warning and you're on a Boeing flight over to LHR and they tell you to get back in your seat and buckle up. This is a little more important, John.
Tom, I've got to say, this is a little bit different to the transatlantic flight that you and I would take. Let's head back in and take a listen to the events as they unfold.
2,000 miles an hour.
Everybody in?
First status check. Astronaut Oliver.
Oh, wow. Go more.
Oliver, status check. Oh, sorry. Blue Control, Oliver, status perfect. Green seat.
Copy, astronaut Wally.
Wally. Blue Control, Wally is green seat.
Copy, astronaut demo.
Astronaut demo, revive seat.
Copy, astronaut Bezos. Copy.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us live for our first.
And you heard it right there, Tom. Astronaut Bezos, astronaut Bezos, astronaut Wally, astronaut Damon, and the returning of the booster, the new Shepard booster returning back to Earth, Tom. You can see the coming back down to Earth in about the next 50 seconds. That should be landing, Tom.
On radio, it's just absolutely extraordinary. The flames now hitting on the ground, the booster landing here. I will have to see where it is in the market. Looks pretty good right now. John, let's let the smoke clear before we go back to Emily Chang to be sure. Yeah, look at that.
Booster
John.
touchdown, Tom.
It's just amazing.
It's phenomenal, isn't it?
It's like parallel parking on Fifth Avenue. Some can do it and some
look, to be
can't.
honest, you and I can't do it. Let's confirm that right here for our audience. Emily Chang, let's bring you back into the conversation. The reusable new Shepard booster is back on Earth. Just walk us through what's taking place right now in the capsule.
The booster is back on Earth, and as it was coming down, we heard that sonic boom that we knew we would hear if everything was going right. It landed safely the way it was supposed to on the launch pad, and it looks like it's ready to go back up there. John, the key is reusability, bringing that cost down, using these rockets over and over again. When that booster landed, we heard cheers from the crowd. You've got a lot of devoted people, employees who have been working here for years, watching this, and now we are watching that crew capsule float on down. Those are the drogue parachutes, the small parachutes that are used especially for vehicles at very, very high velocity. They're designed to slow that capsule down as it speeds back towards Earth, and these are the main parachutes. We're looking for full inflation here of the main parachutes that will slow the capsule down as it approaches Earth, to bring it in for a safe landing. The retro thrust system will kick in, basically pushing out a cloud of air below the capsule, and we expect it to land in a cloud of desert dust. Look at that, it's getting closer and closer to the ground, just 1,600 feet above the ground right now. You can imagine this is the culmination of a live stream for Jeff Bezos, for Wally Funk, as John, you've been talking about, an icon of aviation for Mark Bezos, Jeff Bezos' brother, and for 18-year-old Oliver Damon. There you see the crew capsule descending back to Earth. There are multiple vehicles on the ground in a grid pattern waiting to zoom in as soon as touchdown happens here.
Emily, thank you. That capsule, Tom Keane, 800 feet away.
It's just amazing to see, and of course the debate of land versus sea 40 and 50, 60 years ago, and now routinely done on land. Let us listen in right now.
And it's touchdown. Capsule touchdown. Tom Keane, that looks successful to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I believe it is successful. Amazing to me, John, to see the speed of which they seem to be dropping, and yet a very gentle landing.
The hatch is due to open, Tom, I understand, in the next 10 minutes or so we might have to wait a little while to see who comes out of first. The picture's on your screen, though, for our audience worldwide. If you're listening on Bloomberg Radio, the booster successfully touching down. The capsule so far, at least from what we can see, successfully launching down. I believe you can hear from Jeff Bezos, so let's take a listen.
Copy, first step. You have a very happy Capcom here as well. Let's do a status check. Astronaut Oliver.
Control, ascent Oliver, status correct.
Copy. Astronaut.
Okay.
Copy. Astronaut demo.
Astronaut demo, I am unbelievably good.
Copy.
Blue Control, Bezos, best day ever.
Yeah. Oh, you got fun.
Copy, everyone. Go ahead and remain in your seats. Crew member 7 is on their way. Shortly, you will hear the capsule off-gassing.
Did anybody have to our altitude or Apogee? I didn't. Yeah. No, that's yeah, we'll find out. It's okay. I had my main mission was accomplished. I didn't kick anyone. That's fine.
That was only about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Tom Keane, that looks like a successful mission. The astronauts checked in, the capsule successfully returning to land. That hatch is due to open in 5 or so minutes' time.
The capsule landing in the triangle of the 3 parachutes laid out on the Texas desert, or the plains, I guess I would call it, in a light green scrub. We say good morning on Bloomberg Radio, on television. It's just extraordinary images of a return to space. Chad Anderson with us, and a perfect time to speak to him as Blue Origin is gathered in celebration here. I guess a flawless mission is our first take. What does that signal for Mr. Bezos, for Mr. Musk? What does that signal for Chad Anderson?
I mean, they've been flawless since the beginning. This is their 16th flight, and they've all been flawless. It's really great to see. We now officially have 2 suborbital vehicles online that are taking humans to space. They're going to start doing so regularly. We have SpaceX is taking NASA to the space station. They have private missions lined up. Later this year, and this is a new era in human spaceflight.
Why is NASA focused on the efforts of Mr. Musk and not on those of Mr. Bezos?
Well, there's been a lot of comparison between Virgin Galactic and Bezos and Blue Origin, actually, but the ambitions of Blue Origin are much more aligned with SpaceX. This is the first step in what their, much larger ambition.
What does Mr. Musk learn from what we've seen this morning?
Well, I think he's wished them well, and I'm sure that he's happy to see this success happen. It's happened. He's been a leader in a number of other categories, in Tesla as well, and he's happy to see other electric vehicles coming online. I imagine he's got a similar sentiment here. One company does not make a market. And so it's great to see the increased competition driving further innovation.
Chad, let's go to John Farrow as we see the SUV pull up to the capsule, John.
2 vehicles approaching the capsule, 1 individual running towards it. Tom, just waving at the astronauts inside. They're going to open up that hatch any moment from now, Tom. Any moment now, that hatch will be opened.
So many of the memories here, folks, and it's not only Alan Shepard being yanked out of the ocean and Gus Grissom with the capsule going down into the ocean, but it's always an important mission. Now, I would assume, John, that the weightlessness issue here of the shuttle and the space station is not an issue. When you're up for 11 minutes, I mean, what can happen?
Tom, it certainly goes quickly, that's for sure. I can see Jeff Bezos inside reaching for his cowboy hat, Tom. I think that's going on right now as they go to open up that capsule. We were taking bets on who would exit first. Tom, who went in first? I think Jeff Bezos went in first, so I'm pretty sure that Mr. Bezos is going to be first out.
Did they come out and say, I'm going to Disneyland? I mean, is that part of the...
I don't think this is the Super Bowl, Tom. Tom, this is not the Super Bowl. Or the way some people have delivered the coverage of this, you'd expect it to be just as large. It's the what next of this, Tom. It's the what next of this. This was the first time for this company. What next?
Craig, let's go. Chad, let's go. Excuse me. Chad, let's go to you quickly here. What is the next here that you observe?
I mean, there's going to be more of these flights. They've got more lined up, and interestingly, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where they price this thing, how many people are going. We know that 7,500 people put in bids in this auction, paying up to $28 million, and there was thousands of people who paid, you know, any variation. And so it'll be interesting to see where they end up, how Virgin responds, and where Blue Origin goes next.
John, let's describe the scene for radio here. We've got a mic up like they use for us on Bloomberg Surveillance to be sure they get it with tone, but certainly a different scene than anything I've seen from NASA before, John.
I can count 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals working on opening up that capsule, Tom. It's going to take a couple of moments, I think. You can just about see Jeff Bezos inside the capsule, waving around and giving the thumbs up as we wait for that to open up. I want to bring in our colleague, Emily Chang, as we await this moment. Emily, your thoughts on what's developed in the past hour?
John, Tom, I mean, we all have covered a lot of stories in our lives. Some of them are more memorable than others. I have to say, this is one for the history books. This is, it's hard not to get caught up in the energy and the history of this moment. I mean, it's one small step for Jeff Bezos, perhaps one giant leap for space tourism and space exploration. And the vision that Bezos has articulated goes so far beyond just people having a joyride in space. He has talked about building this road to space, the infrastructure that other entrepreneurs can build on. He's talked about the fact that when he started Amazon, you know, he didn't have to start new credit card systems. All of that was in place. We had a mail service that could deliver packages to you. Space, however, is much more undiscovered. There is no infrastructure. He wants to build that infrastructure so space entrepreneurs of the future can build a whole new generation of Amazons out there. And so it'll be interesting to see what he has to say as he steps off this flight and whether or not the experience has changed him or this vision at all. But you know, obviously this is a suborbital flight. Blue Origin working on orbital flights with the New Glenn. That will be their next big project. We spoke to a lead designer who said they're on track for that to be done before the end of next year. So who knows? Jeff Bezos could be up there again on an orbital flight.
I believe that hatch door is about to open any moment now to see who comes out of that capsule first. The astronauts inside are standing up. They're standing up, Tom, as we await that door to open, perhaps in the next couple of seconds.
They're going to descend down, John, and, you know, it's going to be a great moment. The stairs, John, frankly, look like the ones we have for the Gulfstream.
The hatch door has opened to the capsule, Tom. Exiting first is Jeff Bezos, donning that cowboy hat that he's been wearing over the last week or so, Tom. After him, the first teenager, the first human flight, the youngest ever astronaut there, Tom. And there you go. Tom, we keep talking about this moment. For the 82-year-old aviation icon, just phenomenal. And his brother, the last out of the capsule.
Gather around, I would say 40 or 50 people in the Texas desert. For those of you on Bloomberg Radio, it's being filmed. It will be part of their propaganda, if you will, of the further flights to be had. But what absolutely stuns me, John, is this truly appears to be absolute flawless execution.
What a day again here, a successful launch and landing of the new Shepard rocket and crew capsule with our first human flight crew there, Jeff Bezos, Mark Bezos, Oliver Damon, and Wally Funk. And their families there giving big hugs all around. What a moment, so much emotion from all of them. The elation. Did you see Wally? Did you see Wally when she came out? You know, this, I told you she was probably going to do a summer, you know, cartwheel as she came out of that capsule. What an incredible, incredible day.
A successful mission for an S-16 for Jeff Bezos, Mark Bezos, Oliver Damon, and for Wally Funk. Emily Chang, to bring you back into the conversation. We keep talking about the what next of it. What have we achieved today that was not achieved 2 weekends ago?
John, I have to say, from everything that I could tell, this was an extremely successful mission. This was an opportunity for Jeff Bezos to demonstrate Blue Origin's technology to the world. This is after a 21-year journey. delays, design changes, losing out on contracts, government contracts, important government contracts to SpaceX. And up to this point, SpaceX has very much been seen as the leader in this industry. SpaceX has orbital rockets and is already making trips to the International Space Station and taking astronauts there. This validates that Blue Origin has the capability, and you wonder, you have to assume certainly that the folks at NASA are watching, and you wonder if this changes something for NASA as well.
We welcome you all to our coverage with the markets opening. John, we have to say within the markets, and I want to go to Tim Stenovec here, but John, we have to say that as we have had this launch, we've had an adjustment in the 10-year yield to a lower yield. That is worth noting as we enter a Tuesday trading day.
Your 10-year yield right now, 113 on 10s, yields in about 5-6 basis points. For the broader market, your equity market around the opening bell, positive just 0.15% on the open, up 6 points. It's worth highlighting, Tom, that for many, many people, they do not like what they hear and what they see around this story this morning. As Emily points out, today that was a successful mission for this company. There are many people, though, that would like to see Jeff Bezos do a whole lot more on planet Earth than what he's just done in the last 1 hour.
Yeah, and one of the stark things here, folks, is almost like an athletic locker room. They're breaking out the champagne. For those of you on Bloomberg Radio, we can always describe a champagne moment. Tim Stenovec, that is one of the stark differences here between private enterprise. You wouldn't see that with a government NASA effort as well. I mean, we're really seeing a private enterprise. Tim Stenovec, where does it go from here?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It goes a lot of different places. For Blue Origin, they have 2 more of these flights later this year. They're shooting for late September, early October. Unclear, as we heard earlier, how much those are going to cost. The company has much, much bigger ambitions, though, beyond space tourism. Jeff Bezos has talked about his vision for the future. He said in the past that if we can get 1 trillion people, that's right, 1 trillion people into the solar system, that means we have 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Mozarts. The idea is that the Earth cannot sustain us, and in order for materials, in order for energy, we have to explore further. You know, he was asked earlier this week about the idea that why focus on space when we have so many problems here at home? And his answer was, well, first of all, I think we can do both at the same time. And indeed, in recent years, he has increased his investments with his own philanthropy, but he is behind many other people of immense wealth. The other element of that is that he said it's always important for us to be exploring. It's always important for us to be looking ahead. And he says we can do both of those things at the same time.
I think it's right to sit on this conversation. Tom, you, like me, Emily, I'm sure as well, and Tim too. Over the last hour, we've built up to this moment this morning. For Blue Origin, a momentous occasion, truly historic. But for many people, the frustration, the amount of messages that I've received in the last 60 minutes criticizing not just this coverage, but the event itself. Emily Chang, just to go over the mission statement of Blue Origin that you and I discussed a little bit earlier this morning, I think it's worth sharing a couple of lines with our audience. Blue Origin believes that in order to preserve Earth, our home, for our grandchildren's grandchildren, we must go to space to tap its unlimited resources and energy. For Jeff Bezos and others, Emily, there is no distinction between the work that needs to be done on Earth and the work that he thinks needs to be done in space.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin, part of the opportunity here is for them to explain that vision. This has been a very secretive company for 21 years. Until today, only one journalist had ever visited Blue Origin headquarters. Today, they're open to the national press. We are all here watching this moment and wanting Jeff Bezos to articulate what that vision is. Why is he spending so much of his money exploring space for this 11-minute trip up and down? How does that help us on Earth? And what he has said is, I want to continue living on Earth. This is the best planet. We love it here, but we need to protect it. We're going to run out of energy. We need to go to space in order to mine that energy from the sun, from the moon. We don't need to go to Mars. Mars is inhospitable. We will not enjoy it there. We don't want to live on the moon either. We want to live on these space colonies, as he's described it, where it's like Maui every day, and you can go back and forth to Earth whenever you want. This is hundreds of years out, but he imagines big industry in space, residential and light industry here on Earth, and Blue Origin, he wants to be a huge part of the infrastructure in building out that space economy.
The eyes of the world on the desert land just outside of Van Horn, West Texas. Right now, 8:37 local time, 9:37 in New York, Tom. So allow me to check in on the markets just briefly. 7 minutes into the session. It has been a huge 24 hours for this market. Equities up by 1/3 of 1%. With your bounce back, this is what it looks like as follows. On the S&P 500, advancing just a little bit, 12, 13 points higher. But once again, Tom, it's the bond market that gets your attention. And maybe the bond market pales in comparison to what we've seen in the last hour or so. But your 10-year right now, just south of 114, Tom, down 5 basis points on the day.
I'm going to brag for the 108th mayor of New York and for Thomas Secundo when they did their innovation of inventing the Bloomberg terminal, John. It was absolutely original that you could go from what was called a Monroe trader to convexity and duration math, and then to immediate log analysis of charts. I can tell you, John, it was just like what you're watching with Mr. Bezos on the Texas desert. The 10-year yield right now, John, is a textbook chart of lower highs on yield. It has been 1, 2, 3, and on back over the last 15 days or so. It is stunning to see price up and yield down to a 1.1392. John, we have to begin to be on the 0.99 watch.
Unbelievable. For our audience worldwide on Bloomberg TV and radio, and of course for our audience on Bloomberg QuickTake, the coverage continues with Tom Keene, myself, Jonathan Ferro, alongside our good friends and colleagues Emily Chang and Tim Stenovic. We'll continue to cover the markets, but also this event. Tom, I talked about the late 90s and Amazon and the kind of people that threw mud at that company and its valuation. Why would this company be valued what it's valued when it's just an online bookseller without the vision of what this could become? And I'm conscious of that particular moment in the late 90s and conditioned by it because I do not want that clip to play in 20 years' time of me repeating that same error. Throwing mud at a mission that's taken place in the last hour without any imagination on what this momentum can develop, what this moment can develop into. Yes, Amazon had a crazy valuation, but it became something so much bigger than just an online bookseller. And you wonder if Jeff Bezos can repeat the act, Tom, with Blue Origin.
Well, it's a repeat the act, but it's a strategic plan to move forward. And again, they have that plan in Shepard, a single-engine rocket, which will be put on top of a larger rocket, and that will be called Glenn. Chad Anderson knows this with Space Capital and continues with his patient this morning at this historic moment. What's after Glenn? Does Jeff Bezos want to go to the moon?
He does. He's working with a consortium of he's partnered up with a few of the incumbents, and was competing for a contract that he lost out on to Musk and SpaceX, and they've fought against that, and it looks like they're going to press ahead. SpaceX was the only one that put in a bid that was affordable. Frame
this, and you're very good at this. Frame for this now. China doing a Matt Damon equivalency on Mars. We're out on Mars with a helicopter that goes around. There's government interest. There's international interest. There's private billionaire interest as well. How do they dovetail together in 2031?
Well, this is how so many new markets and nascent markets develop. The government is an early investor in the technology risk and in the R&D, and that's what we've seen over the last 50 or 60 years in space. And then with the retirement of the space shuttle, we were basically saying this has become routine, getting to orbit, and it's become too expensive. And in order to keep doing this, we need to work with commercial partners. And that's what, SpaceX 10 years ago was able to break through kind of the deadlock of the defense contractors who kind of had a tight grip on this market. And they've lowered the prices. I mean, they are allowing NASA to do more with their limited budget, resupplying the space station, taking astronauts to the space station, maintaining station, and also going out to deeper space missions and exploring the solar system.
Let's get some final thoughts from our colleagues on the ground. Emily Chang, I want to come to you first, please.
John, you were asking about lunar ambitions, and what's so fascinating about this entire design process that has, of course, taken place over 21 years here at Blue Origin is they have built their future ambition going out hundreds of years into the design of the rocket that Jeff Bezos sat on today. The rocket is powered by hydrogen and oxygen, a very simple mixture. And on the moon, what do you find but water, hydrogen, and oxygen? So the idea is that once a rocket presumably lands on a moon, a Blue Origin rocket, they can turn what's on the moon into rocket fuel to get that rocket back to Earth, to power it through the space economy. And, you know, what I would say is what we have witnessed today is nothing short of extraordinary. Sure, I know there are people out there who are unhappy with how Jeff Bezos is spending his time, but this is an incredible fleet. The birth of private space industry, the idea that we don't have to rely on governments to get to space, that private citizens can go there if they want to on their own craft. So this up and down suborbital mission, this is just the tip of a very long journey. It's orbital missions next, perhaps lunar missions after that, all building towards this future space ecosystem that Jeff Bezos has envisioned.
Emily, I know you've got to run. Where have you got to run to? You've got to go get an interview with Jeff Bezos, is that right?
I've got to go have a very important conversation, and we're going to get it back to you as fast as we possibly can.
I'm looking forward to that. Emily, you run away. It's been great to catch up. Thanks for your help this morning. Tim Stanovic, you've had problems with the audio all morning. I'm going to take another shot at this and give you a final word. Tim, are you there?
I'm here, and all is good here in Van Horn. You know, when the new Shepard went up, it was silent here in Van Horn. I was able to see the trail left by the rocket motor as it exceeded hundreds of thousands of feet. One thing that I have been thinking a lot about, though, is what comes next. And we know what comes next for Blue Origin, but there's a lot that we don't know about what comes next. I mean, think about where we were 60 years ago after Shepard's journey into space. We didn't imagine that where we'd be sitting, we'd be able to do satellite technology that would allow me to be talking to you guys, or even potentially imagine that we could do global positioning systems so easily, or use global positioning systems to monitor climate change, or what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink, delivering internet to areas all over the world. The fact is even though these billionaires, these entrepreneurs, they do have these grand visions, the idea of what we could be seeing in the next 10, 20 years, we don't even know yet what that looks like.
Tim Stanovic, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it this morning from Van Horn, Texas. Right now, as we move forward, and again, this with an equity lift in the market up 228 points, and the bond market with those lower yields, we continue with one final discussion here on our moment in space, and that is the engineering of our many space programs. Daniel Wood is expert at this, director of Space-Enabled Research Group at MIT Media Lab, who dovetails a lot of social efforts and social policy into grunt engineering. And I say that, Danielle, with immense respect. There's that scene, Danielle, in Apollo 13 where they're going to die. And the three engineers are in mission control, and they got the canister, and they're going to purify the oxygen, or the astronauts are going to die, and they all pull out and sync their Kufel-Nasser slide rules. We are so far removed from the slide rules of a busted Apollo mission. What is the technology forward that we will see from this private enterprise?
It's wonderful to celebrate today. I'm so happy for Wally Funk and for somebody like her who's had such a long road to this road to space. And we can think about the technology by asking, you know, what has been the road for all the companies? I was in college watching the Ansari X Prize. I want to appreciate Nisha Ansari, who helped fund some of the early investments by private companies trying to demonstrate the ability to put a human into space through a suborbital mission several times in a row. And what we're seeing today, you know, with multiple launches by private companies, is part of this long journey. There's also been a great coordination between government and private sector. I used to work for NASA, and NASA has within its congressional mandate something called the Space Act Agreement capability, meaning they can make agreements with organizations that are private sector organizations to share engineering knowledge and experience on spaceflight.
Professor Wood, you were at Kennedy Center, I'm sorry, it's Cape Canaveral, Professor, just so you know, for some of us that are of a certain age. You were an intern there, and I'm sure in your Orlando and your Central Florida, you were grilled, why are we doing this? Explain now, why are we doing this in 2021?
Everyone on Earth is benefiting from the investments that governments and the private sector are making in space. I travel all over the world, and I engage with leaders of countries in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia. Countries on every continent are investing in space infrastructure and are looking for ways for private companies to play a role in the space ecosystem, because space brings us many benefits through observing the environment, understanding and responding to climate change, managing our fragile coastlines, and also thinking about providing services. But even human spaceflight and microgravity research helps us transfer benefits from space back to Earth. We understand better how to recycle water, how to recycle air, and make ecosystems that are clean, whether they're artificial, but also on Earth. And we also understand better how our bodies and plants and animals respond in an environment like a microgravity, which explains their fundamental physics better. There's also the inspiration side. I am running a program at MIT called Zero Robotics, and we're inviting middle school students from around the country to learn about space robotics and how to code. And one day we hope to do this with a collaboration with the space station and expose them to the space station, which has been done before in the past. And so these opportunities inspire the next generation of leaders as well.
The great fear here is that will be a success for the elites. As you well know, we have two Americas. How do we translate technological innovation? How do we translate, as Brynjolfsson and McAfee talk about, the race against the machine? How do we translate this technology over to the have-nots, the technological have-nots of America?
I spend a lot of my time thinking about how we can do engineering design in a way that's equitable, advances environmental sustainability, and economic justice. This means first asking who's involved, ensuring that we have increased diversity and access to technology. It also means designing these space systems in a way that directly serves the needs of those who've experienced environmental injustice or long-term discrimination. It also means listening to groups like indigenous communities that have concerns, cultural questions about what humans do in space, for example, thinking of the moon as a sacred place. So there's a lot of ways we can use space technology to provide services, like disaster response, for example. And we can also then listen to those who usually don't have a strong chance to give their view on what we do in space. Because we're about to make some key decisions as a human race on how we treat the space environment. And I think we need more voices involved in this going forward.
Danielle, just a final word from you. You mentioned the public-private partnerships, and I think it's spot on to point that out. But for many of these efforts, they're increasingly privatized, and the gains will be shared with the shareholders. And I wonder your thoughts on that as we move away from strictly a government effort towards something much more highly privatized.
I think it's so important that we continue to see government infrastructure allowing services like research opportunities for universities, like internationally shared climate data that's important for everyone around the world. I hope that that becomes a public service that continues for years to come. There will also be private activities that kind of build on the government infrastructure. And I think it remains to be seen whether that's going to be only open to the elite. It is possible for private companies to consider how they can have business models that provide further openness to those who have less access or less ability to pay. But this is a choice that they need to make, and I hope they do make it.
Professor Wood, thank you so much for joining us with the MIT Media Lab, Danielle Wood, this morning. John, I think we've got to do a market check. We always need to do that with Green on the Screen, and we can use all the space innovation, John, to say once again, I looked for a window of opportunity, and I missed it.
And you missed it.
Thank you.
42.87 on the S&P. We bounced back 0.7% after the choppiness we've seen in the last 24 hours. Here's one for you, though, Tom. Take a look at space. Take a look at Virgin Galactic and how it's trading this morning. It's down by 7.6% in early trading. Now, the leaders of these companies, when they're asked about the competition, they don't want to talk about the competition. They believe this is a joint effort to make steps and progress where we haven't made any progress for the last couple of decades. I think investors do see it slightly differently. A successful mission for Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic south of 30 at 29.90 and down 8%, Tom.
It's interesting to see. Chad Anderson with us with a final thought here. He has been more than patient. Space Capital's managing partner of the dovetail of all of this innovation, the NASA that we used to know and maybe the NASA that's still there, with where we're moving forward. And, we've talked about the next steps of these people, but to John's point, does private enterprise and private competition get in the way of space success?
Absolutely not. It's driving it forward. We started off in a place where we had never been to space. Then we launched a satellite. Then we launched a human, and then we landed on the moon. And we've been regressing ever since. And it's only thanks to private efforts that we are now accelerating back into.
So what does NASA think of this event today?
I think they think very highly of this event, and they're very happy to see the success. Again, they are benefiting from this. They are going to now be able to rely on low-cost, innovative partners, leveraging reusability and enabling them to do more with their limited budgets. I mean, this hits on a few different notes. One, the inspiration front. Two, the competition. It's driving innovation forward. And three, we wouldn't have the capability that we have today without space technology.
Can these guys in Texas cowboy hats teach anybody at JPL anything? I'm serious. I mean, or at MIT, not the Media Lab at MIT, but MIT Aeronautics, the legacy of Harold Edgerton and the rest of it. Can they teach the pros anything?
It's a great question, and
it's my only good one today, so you better go with it.
100% yes, and they learn from each other. It's a symbiotic relationship. So NASA has a lot of heritage and a lot of great, embedded expertise. They've been there and they've done that. The private sector is challenging a lot of the embedded assumptions and doing things in new ways, allowing them to do things more effectively and more cost effectively.
Chad, just quickly, investable opportunities right now. Let's close right there. Is this a single name opportunity, or do you want to play the industry as a whole?
We've gone from a very limited market 10 years ago, handful of defense contractors on one side and the government on the other. There has now been $200 billion invested in over 1,500 unique space companies over the last 10 years. This is a massive market opportunity, cuts across the infrastructure, the distribution, and the applications of that satellite data in space technology stacks such as GPS, geospatial intelligence, and communications. This is a massive market opportunity that we're just on the forefront of.
I love asking that question and seeing an investor, Tom, lean in. Just lean in and give the pitch. Give the pitch. Chad Anderson there with the pitch. Space Capital managing partner. Chad, thank you for being with us through the last couple of hours. And as we wrap up our coverage, worth pointing out that there will be a news conference following the Blue Origin space flight. The news conference taking place with Jeff Bezos coming up at about 11 Eastern time on Bloomberg Television and on Bloomberg Radio. And I'm sure our colleagues over at Bloomberg QuickTake will be carrying that as well. Tom, before we go, we've talked about the degree of criticism we've had. We've talked about the degree of support that we've had. Let me allow the words of a Bloomberg Terminal subscriber to speak just for a moment. This got sent in moments ago, and I'd like to share it with our audience. Bezos and Musk are using their own money to do things where the US government has not made a lot of progress on in the last 20 to 40 years. This individual goes on to say, I grew up watching a moon landing as a young child. The space shuttle launched in Florida when in high school, and have a signed picture from Apollo 15, John Irwin, on my wall. People saying they should do more on Earth ignores the great advances in technology that pushing into space helped drive, and if nothing else, sparking the imagination of the world's youth to try things that haven't been done before. Now, if we say something has been successful today, Tom, just as far as that statement's concerned, I think the effort towards that, I think we've seen a success this morning.
Well, as Mr. Bezos said, I don't need to say it. Mr. Bezos can say it. We can do both. And that's always been the rationalization.
And they are trying to do both. For our audience worldwide, on Bloomberg Television, on Bloomberg Radio, on Bloomberg QuickTake, that does it for our coverage right here. I want to turn to the price action and get you up to speed on what's going on in this market.
Oh, there you
Tom.
go, back to the boring market.
I've got to go there, Tom. Come on.
Oh, it's your show. I forgot. Excuse me.
My show's like a minute long today.
I'm over